Age 10, the world got bigger, and William began to see its edges. The verdant root had reshaped him in ways the priests couldn't detect, and Alara didn't question. 5 years of daily cultivation had widened his mana channels from threads to ropes, and the ambient mana he pulled from the earth no longer came in trickles. It flowed. He could feel the living world around him in a persistent, low-resolution hum. Trees outside the church walls, grass in the courtyard, the mice in the rafters, the worms in the soil beneath the foundation. Everything alive pulsed with mana, and he could sense it all, a constant background signal that had become as natural as hearing. Outwardly, he was still the quiet orphan. Tall for his age, the cultivation had accelerated his growth slightly, though not enough to draw attention. Good at sword training, but not dominant. Polite to the priests, distant from the other children, invisible to the town. A ghost who happened to eat at their tables. Inwardly, he was a different creature entirely. His mana channels could sustain continuous cultivation even while walking, talking, eating. The verdant root had become autonomic. His body cycled mana the way it cycled air, without conscious direction. He spent his conscious mind on other things, like the economy. What about magic or smithing? Magic ore refinement is a lost art. Current smiths can work basic steel and iron. None can properly refine magic ores. The temperature control required is too precise, and the ore profiles are poorly understood. A smith who could refine magic ore would command prices 20–50x higher than standard work. The knowledge exists in the lost cultivation and forging systems. He filed that under income strategy and continued planning. He needed money. Money meant independence. Independence meant the freedom to pursue the cure ingredients when the time came. And the time was coming. He didn't know when, but the clock was always ticking in the back of his mind, counting down from the... He kept watching anyway. The goblin raid happened in late autumn, when the forest turned copper and the wind carried the smell of burning leaves from the farming settlements to the west. The refugees were from Fen Hollow, a village 2 days east, on the edge of the wildland border. The story came out in fragments, overlapping, contradicted, and reassembled by people too shaken to tell it straight. A goblin war party, not a full lair, maybe 30 fighters, had swept through at dawn. They'd taken what they wanted and left. Fast, professional. Not the disorganized scrabble of opportunistic goblins, but a coordinated raid with scouts and a withdrawal plan. Did they take prisoners? Brennus asked. A man, farmer, built like a plow horse, face smeared with soot and blood that might not have been his, nodded. 4. 2 women, 2 demi-human girls. Fox type, maybe 10, 12. A woman with a bandaged arm, the wound poorly dressed. A child with glassy eyes, shock. An old man coughing, exposed to cold for 2 days. A demi-human, cat type, male, young, with bruises around his wrists where rope had been. He sat apart from the others, knees drawn up, tail wrapped around his legs. And there were people missing. Not just the captured, the dead. The farmer had mentioned 3 killed, but William counted only 12 refugees. The numbers didn't account for everyone who should have been in a village that size. He helped carry blankets. He hauled water. He sat with the shocky child and spoke in the calm, steady tone he'd learned from watching. He learned that the economics of the situation were ruthlessly simple. The town watch cost money. Adventurer contracts cost money. The garrison that would actually prevent raids cost more money than Thorngate had. So the town accepted losses. A few people captured or killed every year, as the cost of being a frontier settlement. Calculated, practical, inhuman. And he learned something about himself. That the calculation didn't bother him intellectually, but it made something in his chest tighten when he thought about the 2 fox girls and where they were going, and the way Alara's ears had flattened when she heard. That's not engineering, he told himself. That's emotion. Winter came, and the refugees either stayed or moved on. The cat-type demi-human, his name was Kiras, stayed. The church took him in as a laborer, another pair of hands with a slave crest on his neck. He was quiet. He didn't make eye contact. He worked the grounds alongside the rodent-type demi-human who'd been here for years, and they communicated in the wordless shorthand of people who'd learned that being noticed was dangerous. William watched Kiras for 3 months before approaching him. Not directly. He was 10, and a 10-year-old approaching an adult male trauma survivor was a bad idea regardless of the soul inside the body. Instead, he made himself a quiet presence. Sat in. "How do you fight them?" "You don't. Not alone. You need a team. Someone watching your back. Adventurers know this. That's why they party up. Solo fighters don't last long in the wilds." "What about magic? Can goblins handle mages?" "You're 10. Still curious. Kira studied him for a long moment, then went back to weeding. "Goblins scatter when they see fire magic. Earth magic, they just go around. Nature magic." He paused, frowned. "Nobody uses nature magic. It's weak." The Catman's tail flicked once. "Stay inside the walls, kid. The wilds aren't for children." The wilds aren't for children, but they might be for me. He went at night, climbed the low section of wall near the tannery. The guards changed shifts at midnight, and there was a 12-minute window where the east wall was unwatched. He'd mapped it, timed it, tested it 3 times without leaving, just confirming the pattern held. On the 4th test, he left. The forest at night was not the forest during the day. The sounds changed. Fewer birds, more insects, the creak and groan of trees adjusting to temperature shifts. The mana flow changed, too. Slower, deeper, like a tide rather than a current. The trees were resting, not producing, and the mana they'd accumulated during daylight hours seeped gently into the soil. It was like breathing after years of holding his breath. The mana surged up through his feet, rich, dense, layered with the life signatures of every organism in the soil: bacteria, fungi, insects, worms, root tips threading through the humus. He felt it all. A symphony of biological energy flowing through his channels, expanding them, strengthening them, feeding them. He stood there for 2 hours, cycling more mana in a single night than he'd processed in a month of church floor cultivation. When he opened his eyes, the forest looked different, sharper. He could see the mana flow now, faint green traces like bioluminescence threading through the undergrowth. The verdant root's sensory expansion wasn't just internal, it was changing. He made the forest trips twice a week for 3 months, leveled twice, learned to sense approaching creatures through the earth, their weight, their movement patterns, their position relative to his own. He never encountered anything dangerous. The forest edge was mild territory: rabbits, foxes, the occasional deer. The real monsters lived deeper. He'd go deeper eventually, when he was ready. He wouldn't have dismissed it even if he hadn't been watching, but he had been watching. For 6 years, since the night of the Lord's visit, since the shaking hands, he'd been compiling data. Her energy levels, her sleep patterns, her appetite, her mana signature, faint but readable through the verdant root. The cough was a data point. He logged it and continued observing. Autumn. The cough persisted. She was slower in the mornings, took longer to rise. Her ears drooped slightly, not the alert, swiveling posture of a fox demi-human in good health, but the lowered, tired posture of someone running on reserves. She hid it well. She'd been hiding things for years, her trauma. "You should rest more." "I rest enough." She picked up the mending. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" He left her alone, went to his bed, lay in the dark, cycling mana, thinking. He didn't want to ask. He'd been avoiding the question for 6 years, telling himself she was fine, cataloging negative data points, building a case for healthy, because the alternative was he was 11. He'd been an engineer in another life. He understood that avoiding a diagnosis didn't change the condition. A crack in a load-bearing wall didn't heal because you refused to look at it. He asked. She coughed. Long, racking. The kind of cough that came from deep in the chest. She doubled over the sink, one hand braced on the edge, the other pressed to her mouth. When she straightened up, she looked at her hand. There was blood on her palm. She stared at it for 2 seconds. Then she pulled a rag from her apron pocket, wiped her hand clean, wiped the sink, folded the rag, and put it back in her pocket. Her expression didn't change. Her tail didn't move. She went back to scrubbing. Divine Sage. Yes. A demi-human female, fox type, approximately 35 years old, gradual onset of fatigue over the past year, persistent dry cough worsening over 6 months, blood in sputum, mana signature showing irregularities, dimming, partial channel blockages. What are the possible causes? Timeline. How long has she been infected based on the symptoms? Based on the progression rate and symptom severity, initial infection occurred approximately 5 to 6 years ago. At the current rate of progression, the subject has approximately 4 to 5 years remaining before critical mana channel collapse. 5 to 6 years. He did the math. She'd been infected when he was 5 or 6. The Lord's visit had been when he was 5. Lord Aldrich Vane, 2 nights at the church, wine service, her uneven breathing afterward, the shaking hands. Is there a cure? Yes. A potion can be brewed from specific rare ingredients, all of which can be found within the kingdom of Dural. The ingredients are difficult to obtain. The brewing process requires significant alchemical knowledge and a skilled forge. I can provide the complete recipe and ingredient locations. Not yet. First, I need to understand the timeline. She has 4 to 5 years? Correct. What level would I need to be to gather the ingredients safely? The ingredients are located in increasingly dangerous areas. The first can be obtained by a level 10 to 15 adventurer with preparation. The last requires level 30 minimum and ideally higher. At your current cultivation rate, you will reach level 15 within 2 years and level 20 within 4 years. Level 30 would require approximately 7 years of cultivation alone, or significant combat experience to supplement. Killing creatures generates experience mana that supplements cultivation. The combined rate could reduce the time to level 30 by 40 to 50%, depending on the frequency and difficulty of combat. You would need to begin active dungeon diving or monster hunting within the next year. Active combat. Dungeons. Monsters. The wildlands he'd been cautiously exploring at the edges. He'd have to go deeper, fight harder, take risks he'd been carefully avoiding for 11 years. He sat in the dark storage closet, feeling the earth pulse beneath the church floor, and made the first decision that wasn't about survival. How far from Thorngate? Approximately half a day's travel into the deep forest, northeast of the town. Half a day. He could make the trip in a night if he timed it right. He was level 12 now after the forest trips, higher than anyone in Thorngate would expect from a child, higher than anyone would let a child be. He walked back to the orphanage. Ilara was there, folding blankets, her movements precise and practiced and slower than they used to be. She looked up when he entered. "You missed training," she said. "I was busy," he said. She smiled. The tired smile that was almost all she had left to give. "That's all you ever do." "You have no idea." He sat on his bed, watching her fold blankets, counting the seconds between her suppressed coughs, and started building a new blueprint. Not for survival, not for hiding. For a race against a clock he couldn't see, to save a life he couldn't put a price on. End of Chapter 7. He sat on the crate for another hour after the diagnosis, running calculations, not emotional calculations. He'd filed the rage away, boxed it up, put it on a shelf labeled vain where it could wait. These were engineering calculations, resource allocation, timeline analysis, critical path method. The problem. Ilara had 4 to 5 years. The cure required 5 ingredients spread across increasingly dangerous locations. The final ingredient demanded level 30 minimum. At his current cultivation-only rate, he'd hit level 30 in roughly 7 years. That was 2 to 3 years too late. The constraint. He was 11. No money, no equipment, no political connections, no combat experience. He lived in a church orphanage and would age out into assigned. He drew a mental Gantt chart. Not literally. He didn't have paper or a pencil. But the engineer in his head laid it out like a project timeline. Because that's what this was. A project, with a deadline, and a client he couldn't afford to lose. Divine Sage. Yes. If you combine nightly cultivation with regular combat, dungeon diving, or monster hunting 2 to 3 times per week, you could reach level 20 within 2 years and level 30 within 4. This assumes consistent engagement with appropriately leveled targets. What's the fastest way to gain combat experience near Thorngate? The Thorngate Dungeon. Upper levels contain goblins, giant rats, and minor monsters appropriate for levels 5 to 15. Mid-level creatures range from level 15 to 25. However, dungeon diving requires either Adventurer's Guild membership or a sponsor. The minimum age for guild membership in Dural is 14. A minor may enter a dungeon under the sponsorship of a guild member in good standing. Alternatively, wilderness monster hunting does not require guild membership, though it carries higher risk due to lack of structured support. Wilderness hunting. The forest he'd already been sneaking into. The deep forest where Moonveil moss grew. He could start there, hunt monsters in the wildlands, level up outside the dungeon system, avoid the age restriction entirely. What level are the creatures in the deep forest? One problem at a time. The first problem was money. Divine Sage. What is the fastest legal way for an 11-year-old orphan in Thorngate to earn money? There are several options, ranked by earning potential. 1. Blacksmithing apprenticeship. If you can demonstrate sufficient skill, a smith will pay you in room, board, and a small wage. However, most apprenticeships begin at age 14 and require a sponsor. Kapfuffer, monster part harvesting. Selling hides, bones, and organs from hunted creatures. Requires combat ability and a blade. Very profitable if you know which parts are valuable. Option 3. That was the entry point. He already knew the forest. He'd been sneaking into it for months. He already had the verdant roots sensory ability, which meant he could detect valuable plants by their mana signatures, and he didn't need equipment beyond what he could steal from the church kitchen. What herbs and reagents grow in the outer deep forest that are valuable enough to sell? Iron root, a root that strengthens steel when properly processed. 8 silver per intact root. Blood moss, coagulant, used in healing salves. 2 silver per handful. Wormfern, fever reducer, common demand. 3 silver per bundle. The second problem was information. He knew the cure existed. He knew the first ingredient's location. He didn't know the other 4, and he wasn't going to ask Divine Sage for them all at once. Not because the information wasn't available. It was. But because knowing all 5 ingredients without the means to obtain them would drive him insane. Better to focus on what was immediately actionable. The brewing requires a high-temperature forge capable of sustained heat for 3 days, precise temperature control across 7 stages, knowledge of alchemical combination sequences. The resulting potion is a single dose, a glowing amber liquid that cures the virus completely and begins restoring blocked mana channels within hours. The process cannot be performed alone. It requires at least 2 people, one to manage the forge temperature, one to handle the ingredients. The forge work demands someone with expertise in sustained, precise heat management. A skilled blacksmith would be ideal. A blacksmith. He needed a blacksmith, 30 to 50 gold. He'd need months of herb harvesting to afford that, and hiring a freelance smith meant explaining what he was brewing, which meant exposing the cure's existence to a stranger. That was a risk he wasn't willing to take. The cure's secrecy was part of its protection. If the wrong people knew it existed, they'd want to control it. No. He needed a different approach. A smith who'd work with him, not for him. Someone he could trust. Someone he could... He stopped. The answer was obvious. He'd been thinking about it from the wrong direction. A small forge, anvil, basic tools, and a month's supply of iron stock. Approximately 50-80 gold. Rent for a small workshop in the craft district. 5 gold per month. This assumes you perform the smithing yourself or have a skilled worker. 50 to 80 gold. At his current earning rate from herb harvesting, that was a year away minimum. Too slow. What about buying a dwarf slave with forging skills? A loop, a dependency cycle. He needed equipment to hunt, hunting to earn money, money to buy equipment. Classic bootstrap problem. The solution was to break the cycle at its weakest point. What's the cheapest weapon that could kill a level 5-10 forest creature? Free materials. A church kitchen fire wasn't hot enough to work iron, but the town's communal bake oven, the one used for festival bread, reached temperatures close to what he needed for crude iron work. It wouldn't be elegant. It would be the ugliest weapon ever forged. But it would be his, and it would break the cycle. Divine Sage. Can I work scrap iron with a bake oven and improvised tools? Technically, yes, though the result will be crude. The oven temperature will be sufficient to soften iron, if not fully melt it. You'll need a hard surface to hammer on, tongs to handle the hot metal, and several hours of uninterrupted work. The finished weapon will... He had a plan. Not a complete plan. There were gaps, dependencies, unknowns. But the skeleton was there. Phase 1. Bootstrap. Steal scrap iron, improvise a weapon, begin hunting in the outer deep forest. Phase 2. Income. Sell herbs and monster parts, build capital. Phase 5. Cure. Brew the potion, save Alara. Phase 6. Vein. Settle the debt. 6 phases, 4 years, 1 chance. That evening, he sat beside Alara during dinner. She was eating less. He'd noticed it over the past month. Smaller portions, slower chewing, the careful management of someone who'd learned that showing weakness invited consequences. She still served the children first, still made sure everyone else had enough before she took her own plate. But her own plate had gotten smaller, and she pushed food around more than she ate it. "Eat," he said. "You're not. You've had 3 bites." Her ears twitched, a flicker of something. Not annoyance exactly. More like the reflex of someone caught performing a lie she'd gotten away with for a long time. "Children shouldn't worry about adults," she said lightly.